from Joe Rogan from 5, 6, 7 years ago, but this little clip sums up to me what's happened to dissident thought. So Joe Rogan's not alt-right, but he is a dissident. And it used to be when I started looking at dissident right thought about 6, 7 years ago, it was primarily a written word medium. And so it was fairly high IQ. And now over the past few years, the quality of intellectual discourse on the alt-right generally. And this little clip here from Joe Rogan kind of summarizes, epitomizes, embodies what's happened.
There's some crazy shit that they haven't even discovered yet. You know, just recently they found a new species of chimpanzee in the Congo. A gigantic chimpanzee that's over 6 feet tall. It's called the Bondo ape. The locals have 2 different names for chimpanzees. They have what they call the tree beaters and the lion killers. And the lion killers are these gigantic chimpanzees. They're like 6 feet tall. They get to be like 400 pounds. They sleep on the ground because they don't give a fuck. They don't have to sleep in trees. Could you imagine a chimp that's not 4 feet tall, but the chimp that's 6 foot tall, 400 pounds, just a giant, and they walk upright. That's the crazy thing. If you look it online, look up giant mystery ape. It's called the Bondo ape. It's in a part of the Congo called Bili.
Hold on.
Different than any other animal.
Allison from Florida is going to challenge you. Allison, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a primatologist. There's no such thing as a Bondo ape.
You're a fucking idiot. Go online and look it up.
You're a what? What do you do?
It's a new discovery. You're a primatologist. Well, look it up. You're not.
Okay, this is like typical Joe Rogan, whether it's with regard to COVID, with regard to vaccines, whether it's regard to any specialized knowledge, where Joe Rogan has Googled something and he feels like he is more of an expert than people who've devoted their lives to this topic. So here's Joe Rogan going on and on about some new giant ape, and a primatologist calls up and tells him he doesn't know what he thinks of what he's talking about. And what's Joe Rogan's reaction?
Not current. Pay attention. Go online and look it up.
Yeah, this is student.
Yeah, you've learned some shit from the college. When did you graduate?
I have PhD.
Rogan's reaction.
When did you graduate? When?
From 2000.
Yeah, when was the last time you got online and researched primates? Have you ever looked at any of the new discoveries? Have you looked at any of Carl Amon's work?
Yeah, I've been.
What are you laughing at? Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? I'll tell you why you're laughing, because you don't have a point. So you're trying to, oh, you're ridiculous. I have a PhD. Meanwhile, there's all sorts of photographs of this primate, this gigantic chimpanzee. Not only that, it's on National Geographic, stupid. NationalGeographic.com. CNN.com, stupid. No. There's bones, there's tissue samples, there's hair, there's fecal matter, there's all sorts of different things. Now, they've mapped the DNA of this animal already.
Oh, please.
What do you mean, oh, please, stupid? You haven't paid attention to it at all. These are legitimate scientists and primatologists that are in the Congo studying this thing, and you don't know.
Kind of embodies a lot of dissident thought these days. Like people who've done a Google search about complicated topics are so self-assured that they know more than those who've devoted much of their adult lifetime to studying the topic.
Yet you're calling up. You've done zero research on this. You haven't looked into it at all. You're telling me we know all the animals that are in the world? Are you telling me we know all the animals in this gigantic, several thousand-mile long, intense rainforest? We've mapped that out.
There's another fake chimpanzee out there.
No, it's not a fake, stupid. It's not a fake. Listen, they have skulls. Listen to me. They have skulls. They have hair. They have fecal samples. They have photographs. They have a dead one. Okay? Yeah. Bye.
They're from Fringe.
Not Fringe. CNN. Okay? National Geographic. All these different.
When it's convenient for a lot of dissidents, they go, oh, it's on CNN. It's on National Geographic. It's been reported by the New York Times. So when it serves them, dissidents are very happy to quote prestigious sources or sources that they would otherwise deride because there's so little intellectual substance to many of their points.
Legitimate scientific resources. Go look it up. Bye.
You'd like to prove that, wouldn't you? Get your name in the National Geographic.
Silly! Listen to her. Oh, I have a PhD.
Right. Let's mock expertise. And speaking of expertise, we have Elliott Blatt. What's going on, bro?
Famous football prognosticator. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you feeling today? The 49ers had a big victory
walking
yesterday.
On air. Just nonstop. Couldn't just an extended high that just been coasting all day long. No, I forgot about it like 10 minutes after.
So one of the articles I read about the game quoted some expert in sports psychology, and he says that the pain from losing always outweighs the pleasure that you get from your team winning.
That's right. That's what drives. That's why gambling addiction is such a real thing. You want the vengeance. It's the lust for vengeance that drives gambling. So how did you feel when the ref waved the game over last night?
I tried to think of ways that I could complain about it, but I think it's fair. I think everyone knows that if there's less than 15 seconds, you don't try to get a playoff in bounds. Yeah,
that's the only time when you don't run the ball.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and the ref was scrambling to try to do that. He has to like bless the football by touching it.
Right.
It was like all these like rabbinical subtleties to football too that I learned yesterday. I learned about roughing the kicker and blessing the football between plays, and what a roller coaster. What a
game. I mean, the final few minutes of that game was riveting.
Yeah, I really felt like I think San Francisco is just like one sandwich short of a picnic as far as being a championship team. So I don't expect them to go all the way, but I'm happy they did, because I think it'd be good for the city. It reminds me of that. You remember when the first Super Bowl passed after 9/11 was won by the Patriots? I don't know if you recall that or not.
Yes,
but this victory broke a long drought. It might have been their first Super Bowl victory ever, or at least in a very long time.
That was the Patriots' first victory.
Yeah, it was the first Super Bowl, was it?
It was the Patriots' first Super Bowl victory. The first Super Bowl was played in 1966, the year I was born.
Okay, wow. And, so this was always, this insult, because also prior to that, the Red Sox hadn't really won since Babe Ruth.
Yeah, the curse of the Bambino.
Right. So Boston's mood was down, and then so when they finally broke through and won, people were jubilant. And that night, I'd gone out. It was a freezing night. It was, middle of winter. I think it was played in New Orleans.
Yeah.
So, but up in Boston, of course, it was brutally cold. And so the Patriots won. Everyone's jubilant, and then ended up walking home, which is about a mile through the cold, and there was snow on the ground, and I think the moon was out and everything. And I'm walking home. I'm walking past the library, and this SUV just drives by me, and then screeches to a stop. Right. And then this guy gets out, and I think, oh my God, am I gonna get mugged? Because I have been mugged in Boston. And so my heart starts racing, like I'm going to be attacked, And then he stops, he's running towards me, then he stops, puts his arms up in the air, and he goes, "The effing Patriots have won the effing Super Bowl. Woo!" And then he turns around and gets back in his car and goes. But it was a heart-stopping moment.
Well, I think it's fairly clear that the more intense your devotion to sports, the worse the quality of your life. Like normal people, happy people don't act as that person acted. So people who paint themselves, people who are so incredibly devoted to sports, it's obviously because they want to live vicariously through this sports team. And the reason they're so desperate to live vicariously is that they want to forget about their own life. So people who aren't happy with their own life, who aren't moving ahead in their own life, who are not assertive and aggressive and successful in their own life, the more desperate they are to get rid of their unwanted self and to lose themselves in this sporting allegiance.
It's sort of like some borrowed functioning, right, Luke? Is that what
I'm sorry?
Is it borrowed functioning, or is that different?
Yeah, it's analogous to borrowed functioning, but it's even less functional than borrowed functioning. So borrowed functioning is if, let's say you move to LA and suddenly my life gets a whole lot better because I'm hanging out with you every day, and you're kind of schlepping me along in your wonderful, exciting life, and you're going to all the cool parties and you're introducing me to hot young women, and you get me this great contract to teach the Alexander technique on a particular movie, and like my life just dramatically improves because you're the man and you're making things happen. There, I'm borrowing your functioning. But if I'm borrowing the functioning of Tom Cruise in a movie, I mean, that's even more remote.
More pathetic.
Yeah, because borrowed functioning always ends. Like eventually you'd get tired of schlepping me along, and eventually I'll drop back to my normal life. But when you're relying on a sporting team or an actor or a politician to provide your meaning and excitement in life, that's that's really sad.
Hey, look, I hope I didn't sort of overstay my welcome yesterday. I got the sense you were losing. I thought that would have been much more fun than it turned out to be.
How could you overstay your welcome? You're so exciting a character.
Oh, I don't know. I just felt like I sort of felt the energy draining from your voice, and then I thought maybe I'd been sort of because I've done that to other people. I've done that to Claire. I've just kept her on a live stream thinking that it was a great conversation, but then really eager to give me the boot. So anyway, well, I'm glad there's no harm done. Now, I was thinking about the entrepreneurship conversation we had a little bit yesterday, and how you say 20%, or was it 5%, 1 in 20 can be successful.
Probably cut out to pay their bills by being entrepreneurial.
Yeah. And you don't see yourself as somebody who's in that group.
No, right? I can be. I did that. I paid my bills from blogging, and I paid a lot of my bills. I have paid most of my bills for the past 25 years from being entrepreneurial. But I think for people like me and for many others, it's wonderful to be entrepreneurial, but they also should have some sort of reliable income, which will usually come from a job.
Yeah. Well, I had an idea, and you can either take this literally as an idea or as a symbolic idea to just discuss entrepreneurship. But when I was in office, I remember there was this kind of hippie chick that would come in once a week and just water the plants, and this was her business. It was a very small business, but it was her business. And she sort of, I don't know how much she made or anything, but I suppose it was worth her doing. And it was sort of like her way of carving out a little niche for herself. And being in it's still sort of get corporate style or regularity to her income. So I just thought it was sort of an impressive display of someone knowing what they like to do and then making a livelihood out of it. So
how about it'd be a really poor livelihood? I mean, I know a lot of people, and I've met people whose livelihood is watering plants. It's not particularly prosperous livelihood.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, but instead of watering plants, you could have sort of a roaming Alexander technique set. You could give those sessions in a corporate setting.
Yes.
And probably get paid pretty well.
Yes.
But you would need a little, you need someone to sort of grease the skids for you and show you how to get yourself in front of the right people. And
I've done some of that, and I know other Alexander teachers who have corporate gigs.
And is that something you're opposed to, or?
Oh, of course not.
No, okay.
I'm not opposed to any honorable way of earning a living.
Yeah, because I will tell you that there's a lot of effort spent trying to keep veal pen workers happy, because when they leave, if like a high value employee leaves a company because their life is suffering, their health is suffering, their mental health is suffering, it can be a very big blow in a tech company, because they have so much institutional knowledge. It sometimes takes half a dozen people to replace them.
I remember when I was working in construction, I was working in landscaping, and I was making $1 over minimum wage. So in Australia, I'd been earning about $30 to $40 an hour. I had a cleaning and gardening contract at a shopping center. And I come back to America, and because California in particular has so much immigration, wages are just bottom. So I went from making 30 to 40 an hour at age 18 to coming back to California and earning $4.50 an hour. And in the course of wandering around these construction sites and doing the landscaping, I would meet people whose primary job was just like driving around with the boss. And they were making $20 an hour. They were making 5 times as much as me. And their primary job was just to be on friendly terms with the boss and just drive around with the boss everywhere.
Yeah. Well, that's called leveraging. You sort of leverage your IQ, and you have to leverage your connections if you want to get in those situations. I don't know. I don't know. You could be like a celebrity Alexander technique guy if you put the pieces together right, but it would require a very methodical strategy, I think.
Well, this is in large part what I've been doing for the past 10 years.
Okay.
So I have clients who are on Broadway. I have clients who are on network television. I have clients who are billionaires. So this is a great part of how I've made a living for the past decade.
So that's great. So is this your dream occupation, or do you have
I love it. I mean, I love what I'm doing now, talking to an erudite man such as yourself. I also love teaching the Alexander technique. I enjoy sometimes writing for people. I've written speeches for people. I make money from that. I enjoy that.
Okay, but so it seems like you have 2 passions then, sort of broadcasting and Alexander technique, right?
I mean, I think I have a lot of passions. I'm pretty enthusiastic guy.
Okay, career passions. Places. Well, is it fair to call broadcasting a career? I mean, it theoretically could be, but it's a hard road, right?
Yeah, sure, but it can be a very nice supplement.
All I'm trying to say is, which do you prefer? If you had to choose between one or the other, what would you choose?
It varies on the day and my situation and my mood. So I have to be at peak to really do good broadcasting. I don't have to be at my peak to be a good Alexander technique teacher. As an Alexander technique teacher, there are just certain principles that I want to communicate. Mm-hmm. But to be excellent at what I'm doing right now, that requires me to be at my best. So it's much more demanding. And it comes with much more downsides. Like, I'm not going to go wrong with an Alexander technique lesson. Liability insurance for Alexander technique teachers is about $200 to $300 a year, because people don't get hurt taking the Alexander technique.
Yeah.
So if I'm not operating like a Porsche, broadcasting, shouldn't be something I do very much of.
Okay. Yeah. But let's say, all right, I'm just trying to explore the possibilities with you. So not that this is a possibility, but let's say you got to be a football broadcaster, right?
Right.
Now, but even I don't know, lower, obviously not NFL. What if there's college football? There's probably no money in college football broadcasting.
No, there's money from college. I mean, sideline reporters on ABC make 6 figures just being sideline reporters for college football.
Are you kidding me? Wow. Or at a big school, yeah, I would imagine. At a big football school down south or something.
Well, it wouldn't be just a big school, but they're working for the network for say the number 1 game on Saturday night. They'll be making 6 figures.
Yeah. So let's say that was given that versus top shelf Alexander technique teacher in LA. Making the same amount of money. Amount of money.
Yeah, so the broadcasting would be more fun, but I think teaching the Alexander technique is more meaningful. Mm-hmm. So I don't always choose meaning over fun, but generally speaking, I do.
Okay. I'm just trying to think because I definitely one of those people that chose the practical route. I was able to put my dreams.
What were your dreams, Elliot? I don't think we've ever explored that. I mean, I know you used to work in a porno theater. Maybe you wanted to be a porn star.
I used to have cinematic aspirations, shall we say?
Are you well hung?
Not that type of cinema.
Okay.
Dude.
Oh.
So I and then but I had but at the same time I knew pretty early it wasn't going to go anywhere. I kind of always knew I was dreaming about it anyway, so I was able to pull the plug on it early because it was basically out of necessity, right? Once I bounced my rent check for like 15 cents, like I was 15 cents short on my rent and it bounced and it created this massive embarrassment, and I knew that right away that like not having money is just not the way to go. It creates a lot of pain, so I was able to be very practical in my early 20s.
But what about working in that porn theater? That wasn't like a career aspiration?
Well, this was a independent, it wasn't a porn theater. Well, actually, it had been a porn theater prior to me working.
Cleaning it up.
Yeah, it was a...
Scraping the radioactive fluids off the seats.
I actually worked
in the hazmat suit.
I worked at so I was one of those, I'd come to San Francisco from New England, so I still had my New England work ethic, which compared to the California work ethic is just like heads and shoulders above, It's like, I was kind of like an old school, Opie, what's that show?
Opie and Anthony?
Not Opie and Anthony, Andy Griffith show. What was remember the Andy Griffith show? You're probably, you're.
Yeah, I've maybe watched it once, but.
Okay, I was very willing and energetic as an employee, and the theater owners were used to really sort of temperamental artist types, and I was basically a farm boy with a good work ethic. So I rose very quickly in their organization, right?
Yeah.
And
you could clean the splooge like nobody else, Elliot. You had a gift.
Well, I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty, dude.
No, you would get down, and you weren't afraid to be of service. Like, you weren't too proud.
That's right, and I was very appreciated.
Yeah, everyone appreciates someone who cleans up the cum.
Yeah.
Like, I should.
What it was actually spilled root beer. A movie theater. I can't even go in a movie theater when I smell the smell of the interior of a movie theater. I get triggered immediately. I can't even be in the room. I just that weird smell of stale spilled popcorn, stale spilled soda. It's just it's my Vietnam.
And Half Galician has a comment here that we should respond to. He says, people like sports because there is real human drama. There is losing, there is winning. It's not because they don't have connections in their lives or live boring lives. So did I say that people who like sports are losers? No, I said the more intensely you care about sports, the more likely you are to be a loser. Do you think people earning more than $1 million a year, go into work just totally bummed out and depressed because their team lost that weekend? Do you think people who are successful doctors, lawyers, attorneys, rabbis, priests, just shave their heads and paint their faces the color of their team and, go scream for their team at a football stadium and hold up signs? No. I mean, people who are the most intensely affected by sports, who go into a deep depression, they're losers. Like, no winner goes into some ongoing depression because their team lost. So yeah, just because you like sports doesn't say anything negative about you. If you live and die with sports, if your primary source of meaning in life is sports, if you get depressed for days and weeks on end because of sports, then you're a loser. But you're empty. You so want to get rid of your life and just lose yourself in this imaginary universe where you have some connection to a sporting team. That never comes from a happy place. Any thoughts, Elliott?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's the people that watch and enjoy sports, and then when it's over, and they don't go out and buy a jersey with the quarterback's name and wear it around town, you know?
Right. I haven't seen doctors, lawyers, accountants, successful rabbis wearing sporting jerseys around town. Whenever I see someone wearing a sporting jersey, I know that I'm dealing with someone who's lower class. I mean, does Elon Musk wear, Tony Romo jerseys? I don't think so. And yeah, people who are doctors and lawyers get bummed out when their team loses, but they still show up to work Monday, and it isn't devastating to their sense of self. So for a successful person, their sense of self does not depend upon the outcome of a sporting contest, right? The more your sense of self depends upon the outcome of a sporting or political contest, the more likely it is that you're a loser. And I don't condemn you for being a loser. It just means you need to go get help. There's something really wrong with you if you are incapacitated for days on end because of the result of a sporting or political contest.
Yeah, I have no disagreement with you.
And Half Galician says, my point is Luke just makes these non sequitur fatuous insights that are as often as not untrue. Okay, so show me winners who walk around wearing sporting jerseys. Show me winners who are just numbed with depression for days on end because their team lost. Show me winners who go paint their faces and shave their heads and do all sorts of ridiculous things to mug for the camera when they're at a sporting contest. These aren't high-achieving people. These aren't doctors and lawyers. Just imagine you're sitting on TV, you're watching a basketball game, and then out in the stands is some, topless dude, with his face painted and his head shaved and, all sorts of team logo on him. And you realize that's your doctor, or that's your attorney, or that's your accountant, or that's your rabbi, or that's your priest. You would never go to a priest, rabbi, doctor, accountant, lawyer who was painting himself up for sporting contests. Right? You would know that that person was disturbed.
I agree, Luke.
And the
Seems
other,
like you've touched a nerve. You've touched a nerve, Luke.
Yeah. I think I've heard half Galician's feelings. Bro, I mean, it's not a bad thing. Like when I recognize this analysis of sports fans, I realize that some of it applied to me. The more emotionally affected I am by a sporting contest, the more, if it lasts more than an hour or two, the more it shows that there's an emptiness in my life. And knowing that there's an emptiness in your life, that's not something you have to mope about or get depressed about. It's a helpful sign. It shows you that just continuing on with the way you're going is not enough. I mean, it's similar to you meet someone with tattoos. You meet someone with tattoos, you're talking about someone who's lower class and tends to make really bad decisions. So the more our sense of self depends upon outcomes outside of ourselves, the more likely we are to be losers, to be unhappy. I mean, people who were moping for weeks after Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, our lives are not materially affected because Joe Biden is the president and not Donald Trump. Like, it makes very little difference to our real life, whether it's Trump or Biden, or even if it's Ocasio-Cortez, right? The system works in a way that the American political system works in a way that the presidents and politicians, they don't get to have that much of an effect on people's real lives. It's really hard to get anything done in American politics. Elliott.
Yeah. To me, someone caring more about sports than politics, I mean, I think politics are obviously more important than sports. And, I was very bummed out about the election for a good long time. So, for whatever it's worth. I don't have anything to say because I basically agree with you.
And again, with politics, I mean, politics, people who are obsessed with politics, they're really making any difference. Like, they're not actually engaged in making any change. They're not building up anything. It's a form of distraction for them. So tens of millions of Americans spend hours a day on politics, but fewer than 1% of them are actually doing anything. So it's a form of, vicarious engagement and distraction, but it's rarely connected to making a real life difference.
There was this phrase, I don't know if I heard it from you or someone else, but it's sort of political theater, or
yes, political theater. Yeah.
Is that? Did you stream on that?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense to me. Yeah.
So apparently, Microsoft Office will offer or push woke corrections on users. So if you're writing something politically incorrect, the Microsoft Office is going to offer more politically correct phrasing.
No.
Have you experienced that?
Are you joking?
I've heard about this from reliable sources like Sticks.
Mm-hmm.
Sticks and Hammer. So I can't imagine. Okay. So Microsoft, this is in the Daily Mail. Microsoft introduces new feature that suggests PC alternatives. So word goes woke. Microsoft launches woke spelling tool. Tech giant Microsoft trying to make the world more woke.
Okay, that I shared a link with you. I don't know if you saw it today, but there was a really interesting piece by Sargon and his new group there about how all of this woke stuff that's infected these companies is driving the top talent out of Google and out of, I assume, other tech companies. So you're going to get this situation where watch that segment and you'll see like these engineers, these top tier engineers are going years at a time because they're always being dragged into meetings about non-technical things, the HR related topics. It's not that they're necessarily being reprimanded, but they're being made to attend these various indoctrination sessions, and it makes their lives really miserable. And so they leave. I've known people that have left Google. They didn't cite any reason, and they were making good money, believe me. But just because someone's making a lot of money doesn't mean their life isn't a living hell inside the workplace. And sometimes those big salaries are what it takes to keep somebody engaged and suffer through all the bullshit that attends having such a position. And so you might end up in a situation where a big company like Google can't do anything. They can't innovate. They can, the people there can barely maintain what's been done before them. And all they are just people occupying a position that they really don't know how to perform in. And it could, really hamper that company's prospects in the long run. But you won't know this is happening until it's happened.
Well, what I hear on the street is that most of the top tech talent is now at Gab.
Are you joking?
Yes.
Okay. You never quite know with you, Luke. You never quite know.
Right. I mean, but this idea that your job is a living hell,
mm-hmm.
I don't think that's generally true. I think for every person who says their job is a living hell, the odds are 10 to 1 that there's something about them that is causing the situation to be hellish. Like, if your job's a living hell, then go get a different job. We're not in a desperate economy. But, people make compromises. Right, they want the salary or they want the benefits, etc. And they don't want to take the initiative of solving their problems. They'd rather complain about them.
Hold the phone, my dude. Hold the phone. You just saying get another job. So you're taking your position is you're looking at it as from position of someone who doesn't have a giant mortgage and a family to support, right? And who, in order to put food on the table, needs to play ball at work. Otherwise, the real world consequences for them not doing that are very, very severe indeed. So them having to endure those meetings is actually best described as a living hell.
No, there's something wrong with your attitude. There's something wrong with you. If work is a living hell for you, the odds are 10 to 1 in my estimation that there's something wrong with you. There are parts of reality you're unable to accept. That there are probably parts of you that you're simply unable to accept, and so you're then projecting it onto your workplace. There's something wrong with you if your life is a living hell. You're unable to relate to people and to reality as reality is. And so you're upset day in and day out because you can't accept reality. If you have a wife and kids to support, then you should be getting the meaning and the energy to do your job from having a wife and kids.
Okay, but Luke, let's say your job is to write code all day, and instead of writing code, and that's something you've trained in, you enjoy, you've made your career, you've really made sacrifices to get good at it, and in order to keep it, you have to attend these struggle sessions, sometimes many a day, or endure really basically demeaning treatment at the hands of managers who don't know a fraction of what you know. It is, I say, very demoralizing.
Yeah, but that's because there's something wrong with the way you're looking at it. You think that because you know more code than your managers, that they therefore should not treat you or speak to you in a demeaning way. And that's simply not reality. That's not how the world works. You are upset at gravity. Essentially, Luke, what you're talking about is gravity.
No, I'm talking about... Okay, put it this way. Let's say your job is to bake a cake, right? We'll use a very mundane example, right?
Yep.
And you have 3 managers who don't know how to bake a cake. And for you to put food on the table, all you have to do is successfully bake a cake, which takes 1 hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have to deliver this cake at 5 p.m. and instead of being allowed to bake the cake, you're being pulled into meetings to detail to these people who don't know how to bake a cake how long it takes to bake a cake. What are the steps of baking a cake? Can we outsource baking the cake? Can we get a better deal on the flour? All of these. Meanwhile, while you're in these meetings, your time is being eaten up, and it's affecting your performance. You won't be able to deliver the cake, right? Mm-hmm. And it will reflect poorly on you. And you are not living. It's not like you're not acknowledging reality. You're totally in reality, but you're being forced to play ball. Right,
but the reason that you're forced to play ball is because you haven't done very well with negotiating reality. I mean, you've ended up in this situation that you find intolerable is a reflection of you and your choices. So someone, if you say got to know your managers better, started to understand the world from their perspective, maybe you'd have more sympathy and get along better with them. And if you get along better with them, they'll probably cut you more slack. But
what's the chat saying right now? Does anybody in the chat agree with me, or
everyone agrees with you? Nobody agrees with me.
Okay, case closed. I think you're taking these not in touch reality paradigm, which is a good paradigm, by the way. It's not like I disagree with the paradigm, but I think you apply it a little bit too liberally.
Yeah, when it starts to hurt, like when it gets a little too close to the home, then I'm applying it too much. So so my supposition is 90% of people who complain that work is hell, that there's something wrong with them. Your supposition is what?
My supposition is this is basically the Dilbert thing. Dilbert is real, right? Working in big companies carries with it a lot of pain, and the pain doesn't make sense to people who are not involved in it. And to accuse them of not being in touch with reality is very, very unfair, in my opinion.
But don't you think most of this pain is just self-inflicted, right? Everyone in a job has to do things that they don't enjoy, but people do it. Like having a job is like being a slave for 8 hours a day. So that's the reason they call it work. Most people don't enjoy their work. That's just the nature of reality, as it says in the book of Genesis. By the sweat of our brow, will we eat bread? It's onerous. It's tough, but I think most of the suffering is self-imposed because we expect that the world should be different. We expect that because we know more about coding, that therefore our managers should speak to us in a different way, that they should treat us more respectfully, that they should perhaps bow to us, and they should recognize how brilliant we are. That's just not how the world works. But people have this tremendous overestimation of their own importance, or they're depending too much on work to buck up their sense of self. And so they're disappointed when people who know less than them are telling them what to do.
All right, I have to pull up the live stream. I got to see what the comments are, because I don't think I've ever disagreed so sharply, so strongly with you than I do now. So I have to make sure that I'm not off base here. So the reason but there's principles, right? There's dynamics that are play that are universal. It's not like these managers, these meddling managers are bothering you is because they know that they're not adding value. And so the only way that they can portray themselves as adding value is to pester you, right? They have to, quote unquote, manage you. And, it's not a matter of this being just, slightly, it's not only that it's demeaning, but it's also counterproductive. It's actively counterproductive.
If it was active as counterproductive, as you say, then there'd be all these other outfits and organizations and businesses that would tremendously outcompete them. But the fact that these managers retain jobs year in, year out, even move up, maybe even make 2-3 times as much money as you do, if they're sustaining a business, I suspect that their managing is not as counterproductive as you perceive.
Oh boy, Luke. Oh boy.
Why aren't there other businesses that then outcompete them?
Because they have a monopoly or a quasi-monopoly.
Well, not in coding. There's no... What monopolies are there in coding?
Well, certain company. Okay, we're getting off track here. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. There's some companies where you can coast. The company is big, it's established, it has any of its threats are just long, a long way off and are difficult to see, right? So you can get in a job and have a job and coast and not really do anything in a day-to-day except minor little housekeeping things here and there. You can really enjoy a very easy life. So your paycheck isn't necessarily performance based as it would be in sort of like a stockbroker situation where you have to eat what you kill, right?
Right.
And so in this sort of Slack environment, a lot of game playing takes place and a lot of political posturing and work not really related to the bottom line takes place. It's sort of a kindergarten situation.
Right, but work that's not related to the bottom line is not kindergarten situation. The company's or the business's reputation is tremendously important, even if it's not directly related to the bottom line. Showing a certain image to prospective clients, even if there's not a direct bottom line, that matters. Like establishing a certain corporate culture to reduce legal liability. So having diversity training, et cetera, to reduce your legal liability, that all makes sense.
Okay, so you're saying an otherwise brilliant, talented engineer at Google who could be on the, capable of creating the next YouTube or, making a major contribution towards creating the next YouTube. Here's where you're mistaken. An average person at a company doesn't care whether or not the company succeeds or fails. They just want to make sure that they get paid and they don't get blamed. Right?
Right.
You think that everyone going to work has this sort of team spirit about them that, okay, well.
No, you said that much of what these middle managers do is not related to the bottom line. I said that there are a lot of things that businesses do that are not directly related to the bottom line, but they may reduce legal liability. They present a certain image. They create a certain atmosphere. They bring a level of happiness to key employees. So there are all sorts of things that businesses do that are not directly related to the bottom line. And it's not out of stupidity. It's because businesses exist for more things than just making profits.
Yes, there's some of that. I submit that they're actually counterproductive. All of these sort of team building exercises and things that companies do to try and retain people actually push people away. But that's a different conversation.
No, I'm sure that's true, and I'm sure that there are businesses out there that operate in a way that's much more conducive to your preferences. But that there will be other downsides to those businesses. So you'll find more bottom line, streamlined businesses. But every relationship, every job comes with a price.
Sure, that's all true. I feel like the conversation is veered from its original intent.
Oh no, we can't have that on the Luke Ford show. We can't veer from original. We're all about the founders on this show and original intent. But I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned. You said, "What about the brilliant coder who could invent the next YouTube, but his soul is being crushed by all this PC nonsense and middle manager nonsense." And my immediate thought when you're saying that is that for every 1,000 coders who think they're brilliant and could create the next YouTube, maybe one out of that 1,000 actually are that brilliant.
I disagree. I disagree. I think, a lot of beginners think they're much better than they are. But it's sort of what's it called?
Young people are
Dunning-Kruger, right? It's the people that know a lot that really doubt their abilities, and the people that know very little inflate their abilities in their minds, right?
But no one over 30 invents anything significant vis-a-vis coding. I assume.
Over 30? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
That could be. I don't know. But the point is, I'm trying to bring us back to something that's actually going to be of benefit. I think we got lost in some minutia here. That's.
Hey, why don't you think?
I think, you know what? But Luke, okay. I think some of your assumptions around this stuff may be what's holding you back. It's keeping you from breaking through to that level that you want to be at, right? If you've got your understanding, would you say that your understanding of the world is fixed or is it fluid?
I'd say it's pretty fluid. If anyone checks out my show, I'm changing my mind on a regular basis.
Okay. But it seems like you have certain foundational axioms that you're not willing to question about certain things. And I can't give you an example right at the moment because I'm not thinking of it. But sometimes we think we're more fluid than we are, Luke, right?
Well, I have an axiom that if we're miserable, it's probably about us and not about other people. Okay.
So I have to disagree on that one. I think you're right. I think we are ultimately responsible for our attitude. But I think it's okay. If somebody's being tortured on the medieval rack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they responsible for their unhappiness?
Maybe. Like they may have poked someone who's very powerful.
But
they may have denied the Trinity or something awful like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the odds are someone being tortured on a medieval rack, the odds are that they did something that led that to happen. Not that they're 100% responsible, but for most of them, I would doubt they are zero responsible.
Okay, so in your world, the innocent are never punished.
No, I'd say the innocent are less often punished than those who do something, who play some role. I think most people have some responsibility for their misery, or a significant amount of responsibility.
I do agree with you broadly. I think ultimately you are responsible for the situation you're in. So I'm not trying to undermine that. I'm not trying to countersignal you on that one. But it's also true that others can really mess you up, Luke. Because why would Australia be such a more attractive option for you? Right? It's because the external circumstances are different and you find them preferable.
Yes. I mean, a person could be happy working at McDonald's, but I would be much happier in some other job, some other position. And let me make a second point. When I was starting out as an Alexander Technique teacher, while I was still in school training, I had to have practice students. And practice students pay $25 a lesson. And so when I had practice students...
Pay or cost? Oh, they actually pay. That's right.
Yeah, they pay $25 a lesson. And so I had one practice student who I was teaching at $25 a lesson, and he would come over and he'd say, I only have 20 minutes, so can I just pay $12.50? And then he would take time to write a check. Like at the end of the 20 minutes, he would write out a check. He'd give me a check for $12.50. And he would take phone calls. Like, oh, I'm sorry, I just have to get this. And like, so people...
You get enraged.
I didn't get enraged, but I realized that this is not working. And so I put a stop to, I raised his rates and he didn't come back. But once I graduated and put my price at $100 an hour, I have not had one negative experience teaching Alexander Technique at $100 an hour. I had a lot of negative experiences teaching Alexander Technique at $25 an hour, none at $100 an hour. So you, depending on how much you value yourself and your time and your happiness, you can discriminate and you can weed out people who will make you miserable. Like when you apply for a job, the most usual question is, what's the minimum salary? So you could say 50,000, you could say 60,000, or you could say 100,000. Right. So
yeah, that's so true. That is so true. You know, people don't know how to price themselves, and they often way underprice themselves. I learned that the hard way. Boy, I was pissed. I offered myself up for like half of what I could have got. I later learned.
And they don't respect you. When you underprice yourself, people treat you badly. When you put a premium price on your labor that is still in reality, then people treat you much better. You were treated much better when you earn usually $100,000 a year than when you earn $50,000 a year.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, it sucks to be poor, and there's every reason in the world for somebody to really develop their skills, because if you're not on the right side of the sort of skill knowledge curve, life is very long and hard.
So people will abuse you to the extent that you let them. Like people will, like if you're an attractive woman, you know, people will rape you if they can get away with it. People will fondle you. People will finger you. People, you know, will just, you know, pull your clothes off if you let them. And with guys, you know, people will abuse you and poke fun of you and mock you and deflate you if you allow them. But we have a tremendous effect on how other people treat us.
That's for sure, Luke. That is for sure.
So a lot of my friends would not put up with any disrespectful treatment in the workplace. They put people on notice and they would quit.
That's true, Luke. I've also done that. Okay, but the reason I don't know how we got on this tangent, Luke, because I was trying to bring it back to your situation and like how you could actually maximize your potential, Luke. Right? Isn't that the most important thing in the world, Luke?
Yes, for me,
for you, right?
maximizing my life is the most important thing in the world, as long as I do it in an upstanding way.
That's true. So,
some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be abused.
That's also true. You're just erupting with truth tonight, Luke.
I'm reading the chat.
Yeah. What's the chat have to say? What's the best comment in the chat?
Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be abused. Everybody's looking for something. Luke needs a pulpit. So do you want to pause for a minute? I'll play something and then come back to you? Or do you have
okay, well, okay, sorry. I didn't so my point is that you have the skills, right? I think maybe it's just the organizational administrative aspects are daunting to you, and you think that, and the marketing probably is something that doesn't appeal to you, right? I'm guessing here.
Right.
So if that problem could be sort of addressed and managed, you'd sort of be able to sort of live the dream, as it were. Yeah, what's the dream like? See, look, you know what I'm noticing when it comes, you've got all kinds of like ideas and thoughts and ideas about other people's lives, but when it comes to thinking about your own life, I think you like to divert and deflect and fodder for conversation. And so that is a mistake I have made, apparently.
So I was muted for the last couple of minutes. So let me just repeat the point.
I heard it all.
I know you heard it, but the audience didn't. Oh, so okay. The most important parts of my life, I don't talk about on here. My most important sources of income, my most important relationships, my most important friendships, my most important interactions with family or relatives, my greatest joys and my deepest sorrows. I don't talk about on this show. If something's really important to me, generally speaking, I hold it sacred. There are all sorts of friends that I have that I would never mention on the show, never use any of the interactions that I've had, never quote back things that we've said to each other. If it's important, if it's sacred, if it's truly the essence of my life, I don't put it on a show. The things that are the most sacred and important, you protect. And I may take a sliver of some important interaction that I've had, or I may have a recollection of some aspect of a deal I did or conversation I had. But generally speaking, if it's important to my life, if it's key to my life, I protect it and I don't broadcast it. Okay, done. Sorry to repeat, Elliot, but I was muted, oh boy, for way too long.
Oh, sorry. Did the audience hear my rejoinder, or
why don't you go ahead and rejoin again?
Well, I would just said that because you share so much about your personal life, I assume that all topics are on the table. Right. But what you're sort of telling me indirectly is that you really don't want to discuss the intricacies of your career life.
Yeah, there are only certain aspects of it, but anything really important about my career, I wouldn't discuss on the show. It would just have to be like a sliver that might be appropriate for public discussion. But yeah, anything that's life and death, I'm going to speak in a much more sanitized way about, say, whether I move to Sydney or stay in Los Angeles. I'm going to speak about that in a much more sanitized way on this show than if we were talking in person.
Well, where does that leave us, Luke?
We are having a public conversation. So okay. The way the way we speak, I'm much more careful in the things that I'm going to say to you here
Okay, so
than
all right,
privately.
let's bring it back then. So we're not discussing any specifics of your life. So what we're saying, what we're doing is we're exploring the postulate that someone suffering in a career setting is because they're not accepting reality.
Yep, that's
right?
my postulate.
And I'm sort of taking the position, well, yes, but no. Right? I'm saying you have some control, but there's times when you have no control. And I don't think necessarily, so we're talking about, do you acquiesce or do you sort of just stoically endure the slings and arrows, which is what I do.
Neither. You have to do soul surgery. You have to get down to root causes, which is you recognize that when you're at work, for example, that you're there to be of service. When you have the attitude of you want to be of service to other people, then your life just works. And when you get away from that attitude, then the wheels start coming off.
That's true, but that's a very spiritual approach to this, and there's a lot of value and merit to the spiritual approach, right? And a lot of times spiritual types either don't or can't or won't be strategic and tactical about their lives. They just sort of leave things to fate.
Yeah, often non-spiritual people are more successful than spiritual people.
Right, because they can plan and execute.
And they have wider ethical parameters.
That's true.
So Dennis Prager is in the chat room. He says, I'm happy to say that watching Luke Ford, something I did during a certain phase of my life, but I'm more mature now and I've moved past him. What he's talking about now just bores me. I still like Luke, but it's always the same topics: Jews, money, and race differences.
What else is there, Luke? What else is there? Just kidding. That is sort of true, though. I think that's...
But why is he here? Like, I don't get that. I would never go on a live stream and say, this bores me. I wouldn't waste my time there in the first place. Why on earth is he here and making comments? I would never waste that energy on a show I found boring.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. That makes perfect sense. Because I rarely sort of antagonize the host on any stream. So you've been journaling, right?
I have meant to be journaling, but I haven't actually journaled.
So when you opened the journal, you said, let me do a little stream first, right?
I don't think I even got around to opening the journal. Like I've just told everyone that I'm going to journal every day about why am I in Los Angeles.
Okay, Luke.
Yes.
This was the idea I had for you, and I know you're not going to like it, but I'm going to propose it anyway. Have you ever done like a period of protracted isolation?
Yeah.
Now, was it intentional or unintentional?
It was unintentional. Oh, generally. I mean, I love a lot of time alone because I love to read books. But 6 years when I was quite ill, I was largely isolated unintentionally. Oh, okay. Dennis Prager says, I followed you for like 2 years and your stream popped up. I need to get upset. I didn't mean to be mean. I'm not upset. It's just weird. See, Dennis Prager doesn't think he's a master of his own ship. So my stream pops up. Therefore, he has to click on it and he has to come in and comment on it about how boring it is. It's just so weird to me. I would never waste my time. But people, they want to take responsibility for their own choices. So like Dennis Prager there, he's not responsible for his choices. It's the stream. It popped up. And that then forced him, took away all his free will and just grabbed him out of the computer. A hand-like force grabbed him by the neck and forced him to come onto this stream so that he could talk about how boring it is. But he's not responsible for any of that because he has no agency. The stream popped up on his YouTube feed and that forced him to listen to this boring conversation. Okay, back to you, Elliot.
Okay. So I guess, yes. So the protracted isolation bit. So you've never voluntarily put yourself through like could you go to like a cabin in Big Bear for 3 days with you and just your journal and some crystal light?
Yes.
Now, you could endure it, but was it something you'd voluntarily do, or you'd have to be pushed into doing?
It would depend.
Consider doing.
It would depend. No, it's not something I'd consider doing because silence and isolation is not my keenest need right now. But I mean, there's a time and a place for it. I mean, I spend often 6 hours, 8 hours a day reading books. I mean, that's time isolated.
Yes, it is.
But how about you?
So
Are you doing these
was
3-day retreats, silent retreats?
Yeah, well, I think like I've always wanted to do this myself, like just get everything taken care of and take off and be completely alone for 3 days and do a lot of writing. I would say I would jump at that opportunity in a heartbeat if someone offered it to me.
I find I get far better writing done after I've interacted with people. It's not that I'm necessarily going to write about the interaction, but it inspires me. I get far more energy and ideas and insights and inspiration and joy and drive from interacting with people.
Well, see, but the thing is what you would be writing about would be colored by your interaction. And what you want to try to do, in my opinion, is to remove all of that external coloring and like just get into you, you know?
Yeah, I've been to paradise, but I've never been to me. I've been undressed before kings, and I've seen some things that a lady shouldn't see.
So you don't think so? You don't like that idea?
No, I'm sure there's a time and a place, and there are benefits from it. It's not something I'm yearning for.
So if someone had proposed that to me, I would just leap in. I would find that incredibly enticing. But I think that's, I used to do a lot of like journaling and stuff, and it seemed to like set the stage for like a breakthrough for me.
Oh yeah, it's a mirror to the mind. It's fantastic.
Yeah. But not today, not this lifetime, as it were. So anyway, I didn't mean for this to be a long call like that. I'm gonna head over the beach pretty soon. So
okay, blessings.
I just wanted to sort of close the loop on our football experience.
Okay, mate. Good to talk to you.
All right. We'll talk to you.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye. Laponia says Leonard Cohen did his best writing after interacting with ladies of the night. Yeah, Leonard Cohen was quite into threesomes, including with some of our greatest Jewish literary scholars. One way that they would often bond is by doing drugs and having threesomes, 2 guys, 1 girl. That provides the fuel for much of Jewish academic scholarship, doing drugs and orgies with Leonard Cohen. Okay, I played a little bit from Joe Rogan earlier. Let me play from the latest episode of Decoding the Gurus.
I mean, why do people argue about something that haven't looked into at all? Why wouldn't she, as a primatologist, go, whoa, for real? Let me look into that. Holy shit. Well, that makes sense. I mean, how could they possibly know all the primates? I mean, couldn't there possibly be another one? But no.
Where was she from?
I'm a primatologist. Those are fringe sites. Like, National Geographic is a fucking fringe site. CNN is a fucking
Right, so I noticed with a lot of this low IQ dissident thought, as embodied here by Joe Rogan, is that normally they despise National Geographic, CNN, New York Times, these mainstream sources. But when there's something in these mainstream sources that they like, then they're happy to jump on board and cite it.
Fringe site. And that's what it angers me about people. They think that they know without even...
So currently there are 2 Elliott Blatts in the chat. Okay, let me remove Elliott from the call. And there's still an Elliott Blatt in the call. So come on, bro. Elliott, you got to get off the call, mate. Elliott, you're still on the call. We hear you sighing. Come on, man.
I'm looking into it. That is insane. Oh,
Yeah.
I have a vagina.
Yeah, how about that? There's so much there, but before we talk about it, the first thing that occurs to me is ladies should find someone who feels about you like Joe Rogan feels about a big fucking chimpanzee, because he's really excited about these.
Not just that, it's not chimpanzee, Matt. It's chimpanzee.
Yeah.
I don't know where I got that pronunciation from. Like, the reason I played that is just to illustrate that people talk about how Joe's gotten worse, and he has in the pandemic. But this is where he comes from. That's him being aggressive as kind of a bit. But what he's expressing there is clearly what he believes, right? We seen it last episode that we did, that he regards himself as being really well informed on things because he does a couple of Google searches and he keeps things on this folder on his phone. And
Robert says, what happened to that old white man and that angry young guy you used to have on? So you talk about Kevin Michael Grace. He's still doing his own show on YouTube. And Kyle, he's not doing much live streaming. He's moving on with his life.
This is an example of how upset he is about.
And Laponia says Joe Rogan could be wrong in one instance and right in another. Yeah, but we're talking about the dominant attitude. And that was an extreme expression of Joe Rogan's attitude, but I think it was emblematic.
People referencing credentials, how strongly felt he takes his conclusions, and also the aggressive conspiratorial tone to it. Like he's not just somebody asking questions. He reaches his conclusion and then he belittles and aggressively belittles anyone that disagrees with him.
No, it's a good illustration. I mean, this is the same guy who believed that moon landing hoaxes and so on, and they were not isolated incidents. Like you say, it betrays that his epistemics are broken. He really does believe.
So there is an enormous market for nonsense, like the Earth is flat, that we never landed on the moon, that COVID vaccines are dangerous. Right? There's an enormous market for much of what Joe Rogan peddles, but he's feeding like Jones, not Alan Jones. That's a Australian talk radio host, but like the InfoWar guys, just shoveling out trash.
That he reads a couple of articles and then has cast iron certainty. His mind is made up, and he was badly triggered by somebody who clearly does know what they're talking about, a PhD in primatology, who just wanted to set him straight, wasn't interested. They really, you could tell it was more than just aggressive call-in bantery / misogyny. It was that he was extremely sensitive and upset by somebody telling him that he might not be 100% right about this thing that he read on the internet.
Yeah, and that's how he was with the moon landing. Like you say, that's the tone that he took when he engaged with people. His tone is not like that anymore, but his epistemics are. And his sense of personal, I don't know, just that.
So this podcast, Decoding the Gurus, it's primarily about analyzing people's epistemics, meaning epistemology. How do we know what we know? So how does Joe Rogan go about trying to understand something? And, he Googles something and he's very easily persuaded, like J.F. Garapi. Like J.F. Garapi completely changed his mind on vaccines. He went from neutral to opposed on the basis of some schlock study by one anti-vax journalist and one other eccentric anti-vax biologist who doesn't have any background in virology. Some, schlocky crackpot study published in a no prestige journal, and J.F. Garapi reads this, and for whatever reason he embraces it as truth. So it's like when J.F. Garapi had Kevin McDonald on and said, "Oh, Kevin McDonald, your theory is so right, it's so true, your critique stands. You just need to drop the group bit. group evolutionary strategy. You just need to drop that. Well, that was the whole essence of Kevin MacDonald's Jewish trilogy. But J.F. Garapi, with his speed reading techniques, he didn't understand the slightest bit about Kevin MacDonald's theory, but he was happy to proclaim that it stands. He just needs to drop the whole foundation of his theory. Come on, man. Check your epistemics.
That he is not this guy that doesn't have a high opinion of himself. Like, that is not what that sounds like. So this is...
And Laponia says, decoding the gurus doesn't offer any proof. Well, they do offer extensive footnotes to every show, but it's not a show primarily about establishing scientific truth. It is a show analyzing how these secular gurus operate.
This is a selected clip that obviously people played to highlight that he's a bit of a shit. And you can find comparable examples of him making reasonable points. But it's the continuity of this kind of reasoning from this clip from, over 10 years ago to the present. That's what I wanted to illustrate, because Joe is a secondary character in the clips that we're going to cover, but he is the platform.
Yeah,
Joe is the one searching these people out and promoting them.
Yeah, a lot of the pushback we get in criticizing Joe is that the position is put that he is a reasonable guy, an open-minded guy, an everyday kind of guy who has been...
And chat outs, Luke, any thoughts on Sam Harris? Highly emotional, sometimes interesting, probably the most useful of the intellectual dark web, but has an absurd opinion of his own abilities and just so completely distracted from reality and from his sense of self that it's absurd. Like, he thinks that, if people just start meditate, then they're going to start seeing political and cultural and religious issues more clearly. That you just need to get people on my meditation app, and then that's going to just make all these changes, and that's the science. Well, that's not the science. Now, science doesn't say that if people meditate, then there are going to be all these huge downstream benefits in increased clarity about politics, culture, and religion. So I think Sam is frequently absurd, frequently delusional, but probably the most interesting and brave of the so-called intellectual dark web. So I would be 100 times more interested in hanging out with Sam Harris than Eric Weinstein or Brett Weinstein. Like, Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein, they're so delusional. It's so little benefit from anything they say. It's such crap what they push. I would not enjoy being in their company. But Sam Harris is interesting. Sam Harris is brave. So compared to Eric Weinstein or Brett Weinstein, I'd much rather talk to Sam Harris.
Misled, unfortunately, by bad luck in having the wrong guests on or something like that. No, he chooses the guests. He sets the agenda, and he's just not good at figuring out what's true and what isn't. And yeah, unfortunately, he's got a great, huge platform to spread that.
Yeah.
Okay, so chat wants to know what happened to Owen Benjamin. But luckily, we have a report from the Southern Poverty Law Center. Wait, why is that showing up there? Oh man, got my windows wrong. Okay, Southern Poverty Law Center. Here we go. Nope, still don't have it.
All right. So now about Malone. So Matt, you mentioned his credentials and whether they're disputed or not. But let's listen to just a short part of Malone describing his own credentials.
Completed a fellowship at Harvard University Medical School in as a global clinical scholar to round out my CV. And I've run, over 100 clinical trials, mostly in the vaccine space, but also in drug repurposing. I've been involved in every major outbreak since AIDS. This is kind of what I do. I've won literally billions of dollars in federal grants and contracts. I'm often brought in by NIH to serve as a study section chair.
Okay, so when you hear someone talking like this, this is a vibe that should throw you in. This person has a vast overestimation of their own accomplishments, their own abilities, and is therefore likely to be a crackpot.
For awarding, $80 to $120 million contracts in vaccines.
Malone's name is on the patents for mRNA. You can't debunk that. Yeah, just because his name's on certain patents about mRNA doesn't mean that he is like this key figure in the development of mRNA viruses, right? I could put my name on a patent, right? I could put my name on a patent regarding mRNA. Doesn't mean that there's anything important about my patent in mRNA. Thousands and thousands of patents have absolutely no importance. So according to the analysis that I've read of Robert Malone's mRNA patents, is that they are pointless and useless. Just because you have a patent doesn't mean that it's important. So it's like all these writers who say that they were nominated for a Pulitzer Prize or nominated for this or that prize. Anyone can get nominated. I could send in a nomination. I could be nominated for a Pulitzer Prize or any other literary prize. If there's an application, I could send in an application for myself. So that you have a patent or that you've been nominated for some prize, it doesn't mean anything.
In biodefense. I've spent countless hours at the CDC, at the ACIP meetings. I have multiple friends at the CDC. I work closely.
Wow, he's got multiple friends at the CDC. He also talks about he has really deep ties to the intelligence agencies.
With Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which is and it's one of my favorite clients, partners, teaming partners. And I work with the Chem Biodefense Group. There's other branches. Including the other, this is not the branch that funded the Wuhan labs. That's another branch.
So this is Robert Malone talking. When you hear someone talking like this, beware. You're dealing with a crackpot.
Ditra.
And he's not finished there, Matt. He will.
And chat says, am I familiar with Richard Hanina? I have only respect for Richard Hanina. So he's written a lot of interesting essays. He's written a lot of interesting tweets. I have high regard for Richard Hanina. But in the past, Ford has lauded Jews for hoarding many patents. Come on, man. Yes, generally speaking, patents indicate some research going on, that there's attempts at innovation. But just because you have a patent, that's the general meaning of patents, is that these are attempts at innovation. But just because an individual has certain patents, just because you're confronted with a patent, doesn't mean that it in and of itself is important. Now, generally speaking, numbers of patents do, on a very broad basis, tell you something about populations. But on an individual basis, just holding a patent, that doesn't tell you anything. All right, let's have a look at what's going on with Owen Benjamin. Canadian technology startup, which already provides monetized streaming for a range of white power propagandists, hate group leaders, and a wanted fugitive, has now created a custom-made platform for white nationalist streamer Nick Fuentes after a payment processor forced him off their main platform. And Hate Watch can now reveal that the Thonic software, whose principals have recently decamped from Calgary, Alberta to Turkey, has so far been able to run their Entropy. Hey, wait, I use Entropy. Run their Entropy platform using infrastructure provided by Microsoft's Azure cloud platform. Chthonic launched Entropy in 2019 as a video live streaming service, allowing their creators to collect payments from their viewers. They've actively promoted the site as a free speech alternative to mainstream social media services. Their promise of limited moderation has attracted prominent extremists. In a December podcast, Greg Johnson, who runs the white nationalist website and publishes Countercurrent, says Entropy Stream is the only way we can take credit card payments. Greg Johnson says, we have been deplatformed from the global credit card processing industry by angry merchants, unhappy merchants who don't like our message, using coded anti-Semitic terms familiar to observers of white nationalist groups. There are some indications that Chthonic has been specifically courting this niche of deplatformed extremists. And there's a tweet from Entropy's Twitter account promoting a live stream with white nationalist comedian Owen Benjamin with the promise of a censorship-free interaction. In a separate tweet, March 12, 2020, reminded followers that they could send paid offline super chats to French-Canadian white nationalist Jean-Francois Garapi in advance of his stream later that evening. And white nationalist Nick Fuentes has also been streaming in the Entropy app. Then November 29, Fuentes told the viewers his nightly stream could no longer use Entropy's flagship platform to collect payments. Entropy is not going to work anymore because I was banned, Nick Fuentes said, explaining that their payment processor forced them to ban me by name. Their payment processor called them up at Entropy and said, if you don't ban Nick Fuentes, we're going to de-platform your whole site. But Nick Fuentes said a solution has been found. We have a new super chat system. Super chats are back, says Nick Fuentes. So whatever happened to don't like YouTube, make your own platform? They're just trying to expose hate, mate. Mr. Ford was so serene when he was down under. What is happening with Dear 40 in LA? A lot more stress and tension here because you don't share the same moral universe with many of the people in LA. So let's have a look here about the
Yeah, nobody cares about what's happening to the Uyghurs, okay? You bring it up because you really care, and I think
What do
that's
you mean
nice that
nobody
you
cares?
care. The rest of us don't care. I'm just
Well,
telling
really
you a
don't
very
care?
hard...
Wait,
I'm
you're
telling
saying you
a very,
personally don't care?
I'm telling you a very hard, ugly truth, okay? Of all the things that I care about, yes, it is below my line.
Well, I think people, if you explain to them what's happening to the Uyghurs in China, they care, but it's not top of mind for them.
That's not
what's
caring.
top of mind right now is they go to their grocery store and the shelves are empty.
Sure, that I care about. Yeah. I care about the fact that our economy could turn on a dime if China invades Taiwan. I care about that. I care about climate change.
So this guy is a part owner of the Golden State Warriors, and they put out a statement disassociating themselves. So I was wondering if he was able to get away with what he said, but it's not politically correct. Say the truth, and the truth is we don't generally care about outgroups. Generally speaking, very few people care about outgroups. So let's have a look at the statement from the Golden State Warriors. As a limited investor who has no day-to-day operating functions with the Warriors, Mr. Paliptia does not speak on behalf of our franchise, and his views certainly don't reflect those of our organization. But it's not YouTube hate speech.
Change. You know, I care about I care about America's crippling and, decrepit healthcare infrastructure. But if you're asking me, do I care about a segment of a class of people in another country? Not until we can take care of ourselves will I prioritize them over us. And I think a lot of people believe that. And I'm sorry if that's a hard truth to hear, but every time I say that I care about the Uyghurs, I'm really just lying if I don't really care. And so I'd rather not lie to you and tell you the truth. It's not a priority for me.
And my response to that is, I think it's a sad state of affairs when human rights as a concept globally, falls beneath, tactical and strategic issues.
So these are all people who are worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And they've got an interesting podcast. But it's just not realistic to expect most people to care about human rights on the other side of the globe.
Issues that we have to have. We need to
That's
have a
another
high
luxury
watermark.
belief. That's another luxury belief.
I don't believing in the Human Declaration of Human Rights that Eleanor Roosevelt
It's a
created with the
luxury
United
belief.
Nations. I don't think it's a luxury belief to believe that all humans should have a basic set of human rights.
I think
That
it's
is
a luxury
basic
belief.
right. Far
And the
from
reason
it.
I think it's a luxury belief is we don't do enough domestically to actually express that view in real tangible ways. So until we actually clean up our own house, the idea that we step outside of our borders with us sort of like morally virtue signaling about somebody else's human rights track record is deplorable. Look at the number of black and
Far
brown
from
men that are
deplorable. Far from deplorable.
Look at the number of black and brown men that are incarcerated for absolutely ridiculous crimes. I don't know if you saw this past week, but there was a person.
Well, America will always have problems. So the problem with what he's saying is because America will always be flawed because America is populated by human beings. Therefore, there's never any reason to care about anybody outside of America. And obviously that's going too far. So it's normal to watch something on TV or to read an article in the newspaper and be concerned about what's happening on the other end of the world. It's rare that people then become obsessed with what's happening on the other side of the world. So generally speaking, people are going to day in, day out, care about outgroups on the other side of the world. On the other hand, it's not realistic to expect that people will never care about those outside their own country.
That was released from jail because he couldn't even be protected in jail, because in some of these cells, they run these fight clubs inside of Rikers Island that are basically tacitly endorsed by the corrections officers that don't do anything.
And the difference?
So hold on, Jason. So if you want to talk about the human rights of people, I think we have a responsibility to take care of our own backyard first. And then we can go and basically morally tell other people how they should be running.
So this guy is a billionaire investor, Chamath Palihapitiya.
Their own countries.
The difference is, Chamath, saying what you just said in China or Saudi Arabia would put you in jail and get you 100 lashes, and you would be tortured for a decade. We here in the United States are far from perfect. We still have the death penalty, which is against the United Declaration of Human Rights, which we signed, which Eleanor Roosevelt created in the UN. And we propagated.
Wow, if Eleanor Roosevelt created it, then we should care. Or if it's United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, like, why would people be expected to care about what Eleanor Roosevelt or the United Nations declares to be human rights? These extra governmental agencies, these non-NGOs, these non-governmental agencies don't have any power. So a lot of people on the right are, obsessed with the UN is trying to, destroy the West. But these NGOs like the UN, they don't really matter.
As Americans around the world, we started that, Chamath. And we can have these discussions about being better in this country. And the whataboutism that you're proposing is so disproportional to the equivalent of the Holocaust going on. We're talking about 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps right now. To talk about what we have.
Okay, so 1 million Uyghurs in quote-unquote concentration camps is not the equivalent of the Holocaust unless they're being gassed, unless they're being murdered. So I don't think we have any evidence that millions of Uyghurs have been murdered by the Chinese. So no, it's not like the Holocaust.
Here that we need to fix and compare it to that, or to Saudi Arabia whipping bloggers and throwing gay people off roofs for being gay. These two things are not morally comparable.
So he's opposed to Islam? Is that what's going on here? I mean, what Saudi Arabia is doing is a substantial section of how Islam operates.
We are very far, and we need to have open discussions and talk about human rights all the time. Because if we do not talk about it all the time, then your position, which is, I don't have time for that, I want to solve my...
Talking about human rights all the time is not going to accomplish anything. It's not going to change anything. So where do these rights come from? Who enforces these rights? These rights are just opinions. They're fantasies about how the world should operate, right? We're all essentially born into tribes, and tribes can afford its members different rights depending on the situation.
My problems then gives the green light to dictators everywhere that nobody's watching. We need to have vigilance. And that
dictators are not frightened that some activists on the other side of the world are watching. Dictators' minds are changed by military force or even economic force at times.
And that's what I find, and I think we need to work
hold on a second.
Your position.
That's not what I said, and that's not true.
You said you can't get up for it.
Yeah. So tell me how.
Problem.
Are you saying that the situation with the Uyghurs is the same as the Holocaust?
People who are Jewish are making that comparison.
Just because people are Jewish and make that comparison is not an argument that that comparison is apt. I mean, that's faulty epistemics.
You never make a Holocaust comparison.
I'm asking you.
I think it is comparable. There are upwards of 1 million people in a concentration camp right now. This is getting to numbers that are actually comparable. It is actually a valid.
We don't call the Holocaust because people were put into concentration camps. We call the Holocaust because approximately 6 million Jews were singled out and murdered for being Jewish during World War II.
Valid comparison.
You're saying there are 1 million people in a concentration camp?
That is the numbers that human rights organizations are saying, between 300,000.
Oh, well, if human rights groups believe this, then it must be true. I mean, obviously they need to get funding. They need to attract donors. So the worse they can make the situation, the more compelling they can make their fundraising letters. Now, they may be accurate. They may not. Just because human rights groups say this doesn't mean it's accurate. It would depend on which human rights group say this and what is their track record for accuracy.
1,000 and 1 million people are incarcerated right now, being tortured, raped, and doing forced sterilization, re-education, and when they're released are being tracked in ghettos.
And so are you
Jewish
saying the
people
entire
are bringing
world,
this up.
Hold on. Are you saying
as a
the
comparison?
You're saying the entire world has basically decided that that doesn't matter?
You just said you can't get up for it. I'm talking about you specifically.
But who is getting up? Well, who is getting up for it?
I am very up on it. I talk about it all the time, every week.
What about the U.S.?
And you talk about it all the time, every week. Does that actually do anything? Like many tens of millions of Americans talk about politics all the time, every week, but they don't make any practical difference in the way politics operates in the United States. So him talking about the Uyghurs, does it actually make any difference, or is it just virtue signaling? I don't know. Maybe he is making a difference. Maybe he's saving hundreds of people's lives.
Government, what are they doing about it?
The Biden just said we are going to do a ban and we are going to sanction companies that do business in that region.
So Apple and Tesla?
I think there will be increased pressure on all companies that are engaging in China over human rights.
It's goods that are sourced from those areas, right?
Correct. Yes.
It's not doing business there. It's if your supply chain comes from that area.
Correct. And it's a first
kind of
step.
like we won't buy Nazi goods, but we'll sell our iPhones into Nazi Germany.
Well, if you want to have a discussion about this, it's how do we disengage from China? We've had this discussion here. What amount of time will it take to disengage from countries that have brutal dictatorships that are committing human rights atrocities?
But again, I think I'm spending a lot of time and money actually trying to fortify America's supply chain. You guys know about some of the things that I'm doing.
Absolutely, it's fantastic.
I'm not doing that from a moral perspective. I'm doing that from a practical capitalist perspective. I think the jobs are better served for Americans. And I think that we should have the ability to build our own businesses, just like China has the right to do for themselves, without the risk of these things being undercut by policies that we don't understand, which is effectively what you do when you outsource your supply chain to countries where you're not 100% aligned with them.
Yeah, and they're dictatorships.
So I'm not even sure that China is a dictatorship the way that you want to call it that. Again, I think
communist country that's in the name.
Look, you have to understand, Jason, there are a set of checks and balances here on China that, at the end of the day.
So the distinction between democracy and dictatorship is not nearly as clean and neat as many people think. So the president of the United States has essentially all the power of a monarch. He can basically do anything he wants in foreign policy. The president of the United States can send nuclear bombs to blow up foreign cities. He can send hit teams to kill foreigners. Foreigners have no rights vis-a-vis the president of the United States. He can go do anything he wants to them. He has that power. On the other hand, these so-called dictators in China or in the late Soviet Union, they were also constrained, right? They could be overthrown. They could be assassinated. So Khrushchev was kicked out of power because of the way he handled the Cuban Missile Crisis. So what kind of dictator is removed because he bungles the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? So dictatorship is not just one man doing everything he wants in a way that's completely incompatible with democracy. So the American president can essentially commit American forces to do anything to non-Americans. And on the other hand, the so-called dictator, they have factions that they have to placate. There are various power sources in China, right? The leader of China does not have 100% control or power over that country. So every democracy contains substantial elements of dictatorship, and every dictatorship contains substantial elements of non-dictatorship. Now, it's not like you got dictatorship here, democracy there, and never the twain shall meet. Well, the twain is meeting all the time.
I don't think that I have the moral absolutism to judge China. And I would say that when NATO is silent, the United Nations is silent, all of Western Europe is silent, and America is effectively silent, that this issue may be small data points being extrapolated in a way to create a narrative that maybe not be true. And if it is true, Jason, there's a responsibility for those body politics to do something, because that is the early warning signal that the rest of the world uses to say, okay, hold on, let me reprioritize my list of things. So I guess what I'm saying is I am not going to be an armchair journalist on this topic, nor am I going to be the armchair human rights advocate for the world, because I just don't know. I can focus on the things that I know about, build the things that I know about. And if something really does get red light status, then other parties will do something. And again, I just want to be clear. NATO is silent. United Nations is silent. America.
NATO doesn't have that much power. right? NATO is only going to do what the most powerful forces in NATO, such as the United States, want to do.
America is silent. A press release doesn't change the actual technical posture on these topics.
Okay. If your position is that human rights matters to you, if large government organizations or politicians give you the green light to care about it, that's fine. I care about it intrinsically every day.
Great. I'm fine with you doing that.
I thought there was a segue there to talk about the Ray Dalio thing that Freeberg cares about. This debate.
And which human rights exactly does he care about? Does he care about free speech? Is he concerned about increasing social media censorship on free speech in America? Is that one of the human rights that he cares about?
That you're having between kind of realism and idealism in foreign policy is sort of what Dalio tackles, right, Freeberg?
Look, I mean, it sounds to me like there's, let's just say, a red herring. There always needs to be, as Chamath points out, a narrative on framing our enemy when, you're running out of land. I mean, you guys saw this, was it a journal article or New York Times article that came out today that U.S. intelligence revealed that Putin had actually put some actors into the eastern Ukraine to set up for a reason to have a response and therefore an excuse to invade the Ukraine. So he was trying to create a bit of a fireworks show to give him an excuse. We always need a narrative that we can sell to our citizens. And so, there's not going to be a lot of, patting on the back of China right now. As we've talked about, there is this, overarching multi-100-year economic cycle, call it geopolitical cycle that the United States and China are about to clash on. And in order for them to clash effectively, we need to get the narrative right, which is to paint them as the bad guy and to make things evil. And look, I mean, you may take your ethical framework and say that they are bad, and you may be able to take other parts of your ethical framework and looking objectively, call some countries that you consider good bad as well, depending on what story you want to tell yourself and what story you want to be told. And I think that's what's going on and will continue to go on for a long period of time. And this Uyghur thing, as Chamath pointed out, how do you measure on an absolute basis human rights? I don't think that there's a way to do so. Whether it's one person getting tortured publicly in a street or 100,000 people being suppressed economically and not being able to get jobs, it's hard to say what is appropriate, what is not, what is evil, what is not. At the end of the day, we create narratives, and that narrative allows the bigger picture to kind of play itself out. And I think that's what's going on largely. And I don't think we're going to hear a lot of good news about China for the next decade from any politician in the United States or anyone that wants to defend our political and economic interests globally, which are certainly being challenged by China right now.
Right. So instead of talking about the elites, John, you want me to talk about Mike Enoch and Eric Stryker, talk about a bunch of high school dropouts who, not saying that Enoch and Stryker are high school dropouts, but many of their supporters are high school dropouts. So those people you were listening to, those billionaires, they have 1 million times more influence on the future of America and the future of the world. And they have 1 million times more important things to say than your meth head, toothless high school dropout. So yeah, I am more interested in what the elites have to say in general than people who didn't graduate from high school. So for people who have more charm than teeth, right? So I know that as far as like audience numbers, you get a lot more audience when you create blood sports and you have a bunch of morons come on and spout conspiracy theories and nonsense. So I chose to steer my show away from the hate porn. I chose to steer my show away from the moronic levels of blood sports. I chose to steer my show away from low IQ, knee-jerk conservatism, low IQ dissident thought. Try to steer it in a more intelligent direction. Those were intelligent people saying interesting things, people who've actually accomplished something in life. And I don't have to operate under the delusion that because I play them on my show, therefore, I tangentially or virtually become a member of the elite. No, elites matter. Elites dominate the world. Elites dominate politics. They dominate culture. They dominate business. They dominate religion. Elites dominate the direction of the world. People who didn't graduate from high school don't have much influence over the direction of the world. They can be wonderfully entertaining. They can get drunk like Ove F.U., right, and fall off a fence and be on disability for the rest of his life. There are lots of people who will come on this show drunk and say amusing, entertaining, train wreck fashion things, but I aspire to more.
Go on. And before we discuss some of that, specifically about the vaccines and his position in that.
Whether you're in the camp that says I'm a liar and I didn't invent this technology despite the patents, when there's a whole cohort of that, no one can dispute that I played a major role in the creation of this tech. And virtually all other voices that have that background have conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest. I think I'm the only one that doesn't. I'm not getting any money out of this. So I think...
Why is he not getting money out of this? Because those mRNA patents, they don't actually have apparently any real-world application. He's not making any money out of this because he hasn't done any work that you could then profit from. But he's posing this as, what a moral character he is.
It starts to touch on some fundamental concepts.
And this is Robert Malone here. And it's just when you hear someone talking the way that this guy talks, you're talking with someone like a Brett Weinstein or an Eric Weinstein who has such tremendous delusions of grandeur that they're deeply disconnected from reality.
Constitutional principles about rights of free speech. I suspect that's kind of where you're going on that.
Yeah. So his significant role in developing mRNA vaccines is disputed. And I've seen some pretty good disputation of that. It seems like a fair assessment would be that he made a small, not negligible, but somewhat marginal contribution to their development a long time ago. Many of those patents he mentions patents are complicated. They're put in by companies and he might be mentioned or something like that, right?
I know. I think he does also own some patents, like primarily, but a bunch of them, like the fact is he's getting no money because this is something that people do in a bunch of spaces related to biotechnology and science, where they try to patent things speculatively. Yeah. And then because the patents themselves are basically vague and technical, when they are then tried to be applied to technologies and they are assessed by people who know, the people say, no, this is like a patent for, it's either too broad or it doesn't relate to the later technology closely enough. So Malone's patents aren't worth the paper they're printed on, it seems.
That's right. The fact that he's not making money off them is at least partially reflects that the technology that they cover isn't actually used. It was a bit of a dead end. And that's what, as you said, that's what people do. Patents are a commercial maneuver more than anything else.
There's a nice graphic that Dan Wilson, the Debunk the Funk host, made where I think it's a diagram showing the timeline of the mRNA vaccines developments, lipid nanoparticles and mRNA technologies, like these two parts that were necessary to be developed. And it shows a timeline from 1961 to 2020, right? And there's maybe about 20 or 30 publications and developments highlighted on the timeline. And Malone is involved with one of them.
So the interesting thing about this is
into the inside of the woke administrative state that is running Silicon Valley. Now, you might not know anything about this subject, so we're just going to have a quick refresher on the topic. For example, in 2016, it turned out that a bunch of the Google top execs were really, really upset when Trump was elected. Some of them actually cried in a big meeting. Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google, was like, well, this is pretty bad. Let's face it, most people here are pretty upset and pretty sad for the election. Myself, as an immigrant and refugee, I certainly find this election deeply offensive, and I know you do too. This election is offensive.
You've seen the video of that.
I have.
I only found out of it because of Soph, and now she's deleted from YouTube. But I remember there's that bit where the big fat guy comes up and he's like, white men in the audience, this is a moment for you to understand your privilege. And I'm just like, Jesus. I always knew Google was bad, but...
It's really bad. And so when in 2017, James Damore released his Google's Ideological Echo Chamber memo, They've just a few notes where James Damore's like, look, right, maybe there's a biological difference between men and women. And of course, this caused who's it, Sundar Pichai, I think it was, the CEO of Google at the time, to come back off his holiday in Africa. So he cut his holiday short and returned to manage the internal structure of Google, because there was apparently some chaos and catastrophe just because James Damore had said this. He, of course, was fired. And he was, of course, right. But anyway, so it's not just Google, of course. In 2018, we learned that Facebook has an internal conservative union because of their intolerant monoculture within Facebook. And they claim to have been actively discriminated against because they're conservatives. And, of course, Twitter has for years been banning people who misgender and dead name trans people.
So
that's everything you need to know.
Saying their birth names.
Yes. The names on their birth certificates and passports. You're not allowed to say them, otherwise you get banned. Not just the tweet deleted, not just a restriction, banned.
Does that work if you change your name and you're not transgender?
I have no idea.
What if I just don't like my name and I want to change to something else?
And someone calls you Callum and you go, no, report.
No, I'm Max Powers, damn it.
You should try it. But anyway, so this is, of course, not limited to any mainstream media, a mainstream Silicon Valley platform. In 2020, Susan Wojcicki explained to us why she was going to start trying to engineer the positions that people have on YouTube. She decided she was going to promote authoritative sources, and she just explained this in a podcast. I can't remember the name of the podcast, fan, so I'm afraid, sorry about that.
It was Rabbit Hole, I believe.
That's it, right, the rabbit, yeah. And so she went on this podcast and said, well, after the terrorist attack in Nice, France, on Bastille Day in 2016, she decided she was going to start prioritizing authoritative sources. She says, I remember reading about it and just being extremely upset and thinking our users needed to know about it. Woman has feelings. She happens to be in control of the largest media organization in history, broadcasting to literally like 2 billion unique users a month. And she's like, I'm in the grip of an emotion. Our users need to know.
Susan, I don't need to follow all your posts.
No.
Like, this is her. So what you could do, if you're a human, is make a post about the thing that you have feelings about.
Yep.
And then maybe your friends or family will interact with it.
Yep.
And that's where it ends. You don't, then
catharsis achieved.
I'm going to send the post to everyone who uses the platform.
Yeah. And of course, this expanded out into the YouTube COVID guidelines, which are actually kind of hilarious when you start reading them in retrospect. Now, I just want to make it clear to YouTube, I'm not commenting on any of this. I'm literally just going to read out your guidelines. They say, don't post content on YouTube if it includes any of the following. Content that recommends use of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for treatment of COVID-19. Claims that ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are safe to use in the treatment of COVID-19. Claims that the virus no longer exists or the pandemic is over. Can't claim the pandemic's over. It's forever.
I assume ever?
Yeah. I mean...
Okay, so you got a pandemic that's killing a lot of people. It doesn't seem the most absurd thing to say that you can't deny that it's still going on.
There's a point at which... No, I can't carry on. Anyway, claims that the COVID-19 vaccine will kill people who receive it, which is why we have to do premium podcasts. Claims that the COVID-19 vaccine will be used as a means of population reduction. Ooh, that's spicy. Claims that masks do not play a role in preventing the contraction or transmission of COVID-19, which is why Rand Paul got censored by YouTube. You go to the next one. After, of course, he got censored, the CDC came out and contradicted YouTube's guidelines, as the New York Times reports. Very interesting.
Well, science is constantly changing, right? That the CDC changes its guidelines with regard to masks and COVID should not be shocking, right? Science is not something that just drops from heaven like a revelation at Mount Sinai. It's constantly being adjusted, adapted to new information.
So who are the people running all of this? Who are the people actually, who make up the institutions at each level?
Wait. He's not going after the Jews here, is he?
Level, going up to the lunatic decisions that are made by their CEOs. Well, we have an insider here, obviously pseudonym, Hazard Harrington. I dead name him, who says that he works in big tech in a now deleted thread. He says, "I work in big tech, a name you will know and have probably used before. I wanted to give a rundown of what it's like from the inside right now. Obviously, insanely radically left-wing. BLM, LGBTQ, trans flags hanging in the office, pronouns stated before meetings, special affiliation groups for everyone but white men. All what you'd expect. Not in any way shocking, not in any way surprising. But with COVID and work from home, this has totally broken people."
Well, maybe we wouldn't have this problem if conservatives were more powerful in creating technology. If conservatives had more power and influence in academia and in cutting-edge apps and in creating powerful newspapers like the New York Times. So it's lefties who do much of this innovation, and therefore they get to get the spoils that come with victory.
They are fundamentally weak, often with no social support outside of work. They're the people with no children and no spouse, only a dog or cat for emotional support. There's constant talk even now about how hard things are for everyone.
Sorry, I just imagine describing yourself as I have an animal and my pronouns to keep me up and running. Like, that's all you've got.
I'm a human being. Is that what a human is?
Well, how did they get to be so successful with these ridiculous ideas? And how come people with more clarity, people who are red-pilled, right? How come they're not richer? How come they're not more powerful? How come they aren't creating innovative tech, right? So if, the lefties are just not so, and they're just doing things in such an inefficient way, how come they're so powerful? How come they're so influential? How come they are dominating, right? I mean, the left has just pretty much won every culture war, right? For the last 50 years? How come the right can't be more effective? If the right is red-pilled, if the right is so much more in reality, if the right is seeing things so much more clearly, if the right is aware of more efficient ways of organizing businesses, then how come the right isn't more successful and the left is dominating big tech? A little bit more here on Decoding the Gurus, Robert Malone and Peter McCullough, a litany of untruths.
Not litigating precisely how significant his individual research contribution was, but what's obvious is that he's exaggerating it a great deal, I think. A little factoid you mentioned to me, Chris, is that his wife was actually banned from Wikipedia for aggressive editing of his Wikipedia page in order to
Right. If your wife is going out there and aggressively editing Wikipedia to try to magnify your purported contributions to mRNA, that's a pretty good tip-off that we're dealing with charlatans.
Magnify and exaggerate his track record, which, again, is not really behavior you tend to see with people that are genuine Nobel Prize winners and so on.
There's a part of this where it actually comes towards the end where he's basically saying that if he doesn't want to be involved with this, it's not about credit or that kind of thing. So let me play the clip.
And they're taking our licenses and license to practice medicine because we are.
And Elliott says the people who Sargon is talking about are the affirmative action hires brought. No, he was talking about the founders of Google, right? The most powerful people at Google. Susan Wojcicki is not an affirmative action hire. That meeting that they were referring to at the beginning came from the most powerful people at the company. So no, it's not the idiot affirmative action people that he's talking about.
We're speaking about these matters, and you can label me however you want to label me. I don't care. I've done what I've done in my career. I'm at a stage at 62 years old. I've got a farm. It's almost paid off. I raise horses. I love my wife. I've been married a long time. My kid.
It sounds like the setup for almost every action movie. Right? Almost every action movie, it's just a family man, just wants to live a quiet life, but they won't let him. And so this guy, Robert Malone here, is portraying himself as akin to some kind of action hero. He just wants to lead a quiet life on the farm.
Kids are both married. I got grandkids. I don't need this. There's this claim I'm doing all this because I seek attention. Trust me, this is not a fun thing to be doing.
So,
Elliott says Obama won the Nobel Prize prior to taking office. No, he won the Nobel Prize a couple of months after taking office. But your point is correct. He didn't do anything to acquire the prize aside from win the election and be the opposite of George W. Bush, who may very well be the worst president we've ever had.
Like you said, Matt, this implies that he doesn't really care about credit. It's just about the truth. This is what is motivating him. But one, it's completely undermined by his constant presentation of himself as the key inventor.
Right. This is the common theme with these secular gurus, is this sense of grievance just dominates them. People like Eric Weinstein and Brett Weinstein and Sam Harris. Tremendous sense of grievance that powers them. Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, Joe Rogan.
Of mRNA. He does this in multiple appearances. And the way that he's introduced on the Rogan description is the inventor of the 9 original mRNA vaccine patents, right? And so on. He's presented as the key linchpin. And the point you note, which is really important, is like when I saw Malone appear on Brett Weinstein's podcast, I actually looked up on Wikipedia, like, is he? And I saw him in the description of mRNA vaccines. And I was like, oh, so, you know, that's the first like kind of bullshit chat that you would do.
Yeah.
Little did I know that the reason he was prominently mentioned there was because his wife had been in editing the article in order to assign him a core role. And she did this repeatedly and then was eventually removed, banned from editing on Wikipedia. And Malone presented this as a conspiracy because he was like, she is a long-term editor, so they're silencing her. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Your close family cannot assign you as the sole inventor. This is like a conflict of interest that should be obvious to a child.
Okay, that's from the podcast Decoding the Gurus. That's it. Bye.